Order the special meeting of the Fall River School Committee for March 15th. Deb, please call the roll.
Mr. Agia?
Here.
Mr. Costa?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
Mr. Hetzel?
Here.
Mr. Corey? Ms. Larrabee? Here. Mayor Coogan?
Here. Salute to the flag, please. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made whether perceived or unperceived by those present and are deemed to be acknowledged and permissible. The only one on Zoom tonight is Kevin Almeida's joining us on Zoom. I don't know if that has to go in. I don't know what this roll call's for. Citizens input, Deb, please.
There's a Melissa Costa who sent in an email in regards to theater in our schools. Dear School Committee, March is Theater in Our Schools Month, so I'd like to take the opportunity to follow up on my citizens input from fall of 2019 and again advocate for theater arts in our schools from elementary through high school and funded in the budget as athletics are. Especially following the year of the pandemic, children more than ever need to participate in activities in which they can express themselves while also building skills that will help how they learn in the classroom, especially ELA and history. Develop their self-confidence, instill commitment and personal responsibility, and improve attendance records. In a district this large, we need to strive to support the many interests of students more fully and equitably. They deserve to be taught, directed, and led by qualified individuals from the world of theater education and middle schools, especially CUS, who has a statewide leader in the same state competition system that Durfee participates in. Deserve to, again, be adjudicated by professionals and see the work of their peers in other Massachusetts middle schools. As always, I'm available to assist in any information gathering on the extremely successful 15-year ELT-funded, founded CUS Middle School Theater Arts Program. There's another citizens input by Colin Dias, 560 Ray Street. I am speaking today about the $2.4 million price tag for the baseball field at Durfee High School. This is outrageous, ridiculous. We are in the middle of a pandemic where our fiscal limits are spread thin. I think for a long time now, our school committee has failed on its fiduciary and discussed responsibility to the taxpayer. We should not be initiating major projects without the approval of voters. With that being said, I'm going to quote a statement made by a school committee member to the Herald News when there was a debate on the Durfee project. Councilor Stephen Camara, do you still think that the voters of Fall River should not have the opportunity to decide if we need a new BMC Durfee High School? Your vote to object last night took away the right to the voters to have their say. The students of Fall River deserve better. I agree with that statement then, and I agree with it now. The voters of Fall River should decide if there should be a new baseball field and a new football field. I remember when we were discussing the Durfee High School, the Durfee Rising Committee told us we don't have to pay for the pool, we don't have to pay for the bells, we don't have to pay for the fields. And now the taxpayers have to pay for both the football field and the baseball field. We were not honest with the taxpayers. We lied to them. I spoke to people who have played both football and baseball on the Durfee field, and they told me that the football field is fine. It's the baseball field that is in poor condition. If we're going to be wasting millions of dollars on fields, we should be repairing fields that need it, the baseball field. Did this go before the Durfee Building Committee? Lastly, why are we going to spend over $2 million on a baseball field anyway? Is it because there is AstroTurf on this field as well? Why are we using AstroTurf there? There are reports of serious medical side effects with AstroTurf, along with higher rate of injury. If the school committee cares about the kids, They would refer these matters to the voters for approval. We need to stop keeping the residents of our city out of the loop on school department affairs. Sadly, keeping the residents out of the school department affairs is something the committee has gone great at doing. That's what he wrote. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Deb. Okay, so we'll move on to Committee of the Whole, Budget Item 3.1 for pre-K schools. First up tonight from Doran, Eric Bradley.
Good afternoon, Mayor Coogan, Superintendent Malone, members of the school committee. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you a little bit this afternoon just about the Doran School and our proposed budget for FY22. So just a quick overview of our school. We're a 2-unit school, pre-K through 8. We do have 3 substantially separate social emotional classrooms that serve up to 5th grade. We're departmentalized in ELA and math from 3 to 5, and then in all 4 content areas in our middle school. Our specialist offerings are art, music, PE, and technology. We are, similar to the other middle schools in the district, running the Verizon Bills grant program this year. And then we also have Project Lead the Way launch grant in place, building through K1, working our way up through 5th grade over the next couple of years. Our priority areas for this year, as I know you see on your face sheet, is focusing on our MTSS model, strengthening that throughout our school, our pre-K through 8 model. Also, we've spent a lot of time and energy this year on our SEL practices and enhancing our Choose Love work specific to the pandemic and the needs of our students in all 4 cohorts. And then this year we've also initiated a teacher-led diversity and equity committee that was sort of teacher-driven out of some of the events of last spring and summer that we've had some great success with so far this year. My budget request moving forward into next year is to add a second science teacher. Currently at Doran, we have a science teacher that teaches all 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science. So what we're asking for is a second teacher that would teach 5th and 6th grade science, and our current science teacher would remain teaching 7th and 8th. The reason for this is a couple. The full 3 grade level schedule is quite challenging in terms of looking at the 3 different standard areas across all 3 grades. And with 8th grade being a testing grade as well as 5th grade, we want to really emphasize strong instruction with spreading out across 2 teachers. Similarly, currently our 5th grade teacher teaches math and science. With this new model, we would be able to dedicate a science teacher to 5th grade science only, in addition to 6th grade, therefore going deeper with a lot of that work with our students who have missed out, I would say, on some of the solid science instruction that a designated science teacher can provide at the 5th grade level. The second position would be a .5 guidance counselor. As a middle school, currently our SAC, our school adjustment counselor, who works with our 4th through 8th graders, also assumes all sort of guidance counselor roles, working with us on scheduling, supporting students with their high school selection and course selection. And so the addition of this .5 guidance counselor would take over a lot of that work with our scheduling pieces, as well as working with our MTSS model. And they could also support our middle school staff with some data analysis, similar to how our interventionist teachers work at the elementary level. And then lastly, we are requesting a lead teacher stipend in the area of special education, inclusion special ed. We have our special ed teachers, their caseloads are within the normal range. However, because of the grade span within our school, within the 10 grades, a lead teacher would support a lot of data analysis, in-house sort of professional development for our inclusion teachers, and help to support just some of the breadth the challenges that they face with covering so many grades across the special ed inclusion teachers that we have. So that would just be someone who would kind of help drive and organize some of that work. So with that, I would open it up to any questions or anything you'd like to know about the school.
Mr. Hetzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a need for a full-time guidance counselor?
So we've never had one before, so it's a luxury. We're excited about the possibility of this position being added. The SAC that we have in place does a fantastic job with this. So currently I feel that with the .5, we would be able to manage what the needs that we have in this area. That would free up the SAC to do more of the SEL work that she excels at. So currently I feel the 0.5 would be an appropriate fit.
Okay, and one quick question, follow-up question. How many school adjustment counselors do you have now?
So we have 2 school adjustment counselors and 1 student support coordinator. They sort of split up the
Okay.
10 grades.
That makes sense. All right, thank you, I yield.
Anything further for Mr. Bradley?
Just a quick question, just
Ms.
to,
Riley?
thank you for your presentation. Just to add on to Mr. Hetzler, you said that the guidance counselor, the .5 guidance counselor would be able to let the student adjustment counselor handle more of her duties.
Mhm.
What about all of her duties and maybe make it a full guidance counselor? You know, would that, I mean, I guess I have a little bit of an issue with more of her duties. You know, I mean, jobs are distinctly different, correct?
Mhm.
And she's kind of doing, or he, I don't even know who it is, right? I haven't looked, but doing some of the guidance counselor's position.
Mhm.
If you had a full guidance counselor, then maybe the student adjustment counselor could just focus on
Yeah.
what they need to.
Yeah, I mean,
That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I said, I feel like we're appropriately staffed at this point. She works very well. I mean, we could always use, there's always more to do, of course, in any
Right.
position in the district.
Right.
So,
Right.
but.
I just think moving forward, after the year that these kids have been through, maybe it would be a good idea. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't think it could hurt. I don't think it would hurt, but
Mhm.
that's just my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
I yield.
Yield. Anything further for Mr. Bradley? Mr. Aguirre, oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Malone. Next. Do you want him to go first? Okay, go ahead.
I just want to comment. So we've never had guidance counselors at the KH before. So this was, when we first built the budget, trying to get it on the board, so we decided to split it. We will have enough funding that I could do one in each. Now, the reason why we wanted to put a guidance counselor at the K-8 is so that the 7th and 8th graders could have the same access that the kids at the other middle schools get to the guidance counseling, the college and career kind of counseling. That's different than what SACs do. So I'll write down on my list of things that we're not averse to it, but when we originally built the budget, the reason why we split it half and half was just to get on the board, not realizing we were going to get more and more of the federal funding, if you will. So it's an idea that we would support. I'll write it down and we can talk about it later. The second part is I just want to make sure we also have a cluster coordinator at Doran for this coming year. So that's specifically for his EI program, substantially separate SPED. They have enough kids and grade levels to be able to have their own specific coordination.
Could you remind me of what the cluster coordinators'
So,
duties are?
Cluster coordinators is a position that Assistant Superintendent Loesch it brought into the district to organize around, like, for example, if you have an ASD program, you would have a cluster coordinator that's doing the administrative functionality of making sure that we're doing everything that we need to do to support all the record keeping, all the meetings, all the daily attendance, all the supports. So it's basically a program manager just for that unique classification. So this person would have expertise in his building in emotionally impaired rooms.
Okay. Thank you. I yield.
Mr. Aguirre?
So I mentioned it last time about equity across all the schools. So each person that comes before us, we get a list of, obviously the main sheet shows how many students, how many of each person. So I really like the sheet, and I don't have it in front of me, but I hope everybody's gotten it by now. It shows you across all schools what each student has, how many, what's their enrollment, what's that. So for the committee, it's good to see, so we can actually see how many of each person has. So when I look at the Doran, I see it says 484 students, which is kind of small when you consider some of the other schools we have. You have 3 admin, what I call admin, which is principal, vice principals. You have 3 counselors, adjustment counselors, student support coordinators, and you have 4 what I call instructional admins, such as department heads and interventionists. So what I've done is look at that master list and then look at each one of these presentations, and I write on top 3, 4, whatever. When I look that up and I say you got 484 students, Last meeting, we were talking about people with school adjustment counselors that have higher than a 300-to-1 caseload. When you divide the 484 by 3, I would agree with you that you're pretty fully staffed as far as, when you're looking at the numbers of equity across all schools. So while I am supportive of additional counseling positions, we also have to take into consideration across all the other schools to see, where you have. So if you have 484, somebody else has 800, it should be, obviously, they should have more than 3 administrators, they should have more than 4 instruction. You get what I'm saying. So I'm not trying to say I'm not in favor of those positions, but when you look at the number of students divided by your caseload of counselors, you're in a probably better shape than almost any school, in the district. One of the questions I've been asking to people is I know we're looking at further having some more revenue. Is there anything on a wish list that you'd really like to have that you didn't make the budget cut?
So, I think that we do, to your point about the counselors and our school adjustment counselors, they do a lot of family outreach work, of course. We have the student support coordinator that works closely with our families and our community partners. We do have 20% of our students who speak a language other than English at home. So our SACs and our office staff are able to work with those families in terms of language needs as much as possible. However, the idea of some sort of a community support liaison, which I know is a position that I believe is in some schools' budgets, is certainly something that it would be of benefit to connect more with some of our families from diverse backgrounds.
Thank you, I yield.
Anything further? Mr. Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, through you, Mr. Chair, to the superintendent, you mentioned that the Doran's going to get a cluster coordinator as well from the SPED department?
Yes, that's at the top of the page under district positions. It says Doran, cluster coordinator. It's not on that. If you look at the document in the front of your binder with
Oh, in the front of the binder.
district positions.
And the only reason I raise that is that I also see that Mr. Bradley's asking for a stipend for a lead teacher in the SPED department. So tell me, what is it that the cluster coordinator couldn't do that your SPED lead teacher is going to do? Because if I heard you correctly, you said they'll help with, basically obtaining some data in terms of that population, the SPED population. So what is it that your cluster coordinator isn't able to do that you're going to have that SPED?
So the cluster coordinator position is new to all of us. My understanding is that it's going to be specifically focused on our substantially separate classrooms, of which I had the 3, whereas the lead teacher that I'm requesting the stipended position would be specific to our inclusion special ed staff. So sort of two camps, if you will. So the lead teacher would work with our would be one of our 5 inclusion staff, working with K through 8 general inclusion students, not sub-separate.
So then what else is the SPED lead teacher going to do, other than
So,
provide some additional data?
So we have the 2 interventionists that work across primarily our elementary school. So they're FREA positions, so they work closely with students and teachers, of course. But they also coordinate and facilitate a lot of data meetings with my department heads. They do a lot of data dashboard, housing of data, working with students around the data. And so one of my visions for the lead position with the teacher position within inclusion would be someone to do a lot of that work, to lead data discussions with special ed teachers in particular. That's focused more directly on special education data.
And there's no one else within the administrative structure, Mr. Aguirre pointed out, there's no one else in the administrative structure that could assist with that?
So the department heads, of course, are experts in that work. So currently they take on that role. But like all schools, we're always trying to build from within. So we see this as an opportunity to work with a teacher to kind of strengthen, his skills in this area of data analysis, to then work more closely with their colleagues away from an administrative lens, perhaps.
I mean, the stipends, aren't exorbitant. It's just, I'm trying to wrap my head around, this is fairly new, if not new, to the district. I don't recall prior budgets in, I don't know how many years where we've had lead stipends. And so just trying to wrap my head around, I've seen them pop up in other schools this budget season. They seem to be highlighted as a need for the district. And so I'm just trying to grasp, what's going to be the role of that individual? And so they'll receive that additional funding, that additional stipend, but, has the district come up with a set of responsibilities that each of those lead teachers are going to be accountable for? And the reason I raise that is it shouldn't just be, if it's going to be the same dollar amount, it should be the same requirements, or at least a foundation of requirements. And obviously, if the needs exist within a school, leave it up to the building principals to decide what additional functions or duties. But I've seen a number of them throughout the budget presentations, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around what is it they're going to do. And it sounds like they're more of a support to the teachers that are there, someone who may be in a position to be sort of a senior teacher, if you will, or someone who has that experience to offer to the rest of the building. And so if it hasn't or it doesn't exist, then I'd like to ask through the chairperson to the superintendent, just for a little more clarity as to what these positions are and what they're going to do for the district. I understand the difference now, and I appreciate your explanation with respect to the cost of the coordinator and how that's going to be more for the self-contained as opposed to inclusion. It makes more sense to have that person focus specifically on those 3 classes that you have. So that's helpful for me, and I appreciate that. And I don't mean necessarily to target the Doran's lead teacher position. I've heard it a number of times. It just today, when I heard it again, sort of sparked me and to try to get additional information as to what those positions are going to look like across the district. Are they, and for lack of a better word, are they temporary or a temporary solution to what's going on, or is this something that the district's going to move to in terms of how we staff our schools, in terms of lead teachers? I'm just trying to get my hands around that. But not necessarily for you today, Mr. Bradley, but as far as the guidance counselor, I agree with Ms. Larrabee, if it's something that's going to be to assist with and it's half-time, then maybe looking to advocate for a full-time position and leave that person strictly available to do the work as the adjustment counselor. May be beneficial. Again, I don't have an in-depth knowledge of your day-to-day operations, nor do I care to go down that path. That's for you folks up there, and you all do a great job with that stuff. I'm just looking for to be supportive if there are needs, but also understand that there's a finite amount of funds, and let's look to how we can target those funding to get the most benefit for your school and for the other schools in the district. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I yield.
Mr. Malone?
Yes, Mr. Costa, the lead teacher position was negotiated in the contract that was approved in 2017. So these were positions that we negotiated based on specific needs in each building. There's a job description. It's part of the contract. The duties include serving on the instructional leadership team, mentoring teachers, attending other meetings, and then being the lead to go in and support new hires and also other hires that may have trouble. So it's uniform across schools. Why you may be seeing more this year is because one of the number one requests is we've had so much success with them when we started this, and I think it came out of Bavaris and then Fonseca, right? So 2 turnaround schools. One of the successes is when principals bring forward is the need to really have expertise in their building. Instead of asking people to do so much more, they're 1-year positions, people apply for them. It's a stipend, I think it's $4,000. It comes with X amount, so you don't have it for life. Each year you would have to apply based on how many you have, but most schools have them in specific content areas or grade levels. Some of the schools, like Fonseca, has 1 per grade level.
So these originated in turnaround schools?
They originated in turnaround schools with the work with, who's that group you guys brought in? Teach Plus with Viveris, the original turnaround. And then when we started negotiating the MOA for Fonseca, we said, why don't we use the lead teacher, which you already had some language for. We just established, I think, a tighter roles, and we put them in place. So each year we've been adding them. There's great value to them, but it's not this has been one of those things, like I know Mr. Aguirre is always looking at the issue of consistency and equity. Not everyone in the past 3 years, that was their first request, but now as we're getting you know, 4 years into these same budget hearings, more and more people have used them. So usually what they try to do is have a lead teacher where you don't have a coach in a specific content area. His for SPED is to have a SPED, essentially, someone that's an expert in the inclusion to work with those 5 other teachers who do that work specifically, and the cluster coordinator is going to be very specified just with that
Yeah, I get the
population.
differentiation between the roles, and I'm okay with that. That makes sense, to have someone specifically, the cluster coordinator, focus on the inclusion, and you know, the SPED individual focus on the other needs in that department. But if they were used as part of the turnaround, I would understand and certainly support that, and I'm sure I did it along the way at some point. Just seeing them now across the entire district, for me, and again, if I missed it, then, you know, I missed it, but to me, it just seems like there's more of a request for them now, and if they're working great, if you could, maybe in a Friday memo or something, just send a reminder to the committee.
Yep.
In terms of what the specific job description, I
Yep.
guess, is for each of those positions. Thank you for that information. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anything for Kevin?
Just on that same note, if it is such a thing that we're going to do across the district, same comment I was making before on equity, if it's working great and it should be at every school. So I'd like to get a copy of what these are, what schools we have this position at, and if it's something that's really valuable, it should be done universally across all the schools. So I'd be curious to see where if you haven't jumped on like creating it at one of these budget hearings, then you're out of luck, but then somebody else that maybe didn't need as many other things that they had to ask for gets it. So strictly equity, let's look at across all schools. If it's worth it, we should do it at all schools, just like the counselors. If we look at numbers, if we say 200 to 1, 250 to 1,
250.
180, I think that would be a good thing to do. With that, I yield.
Okay. Anything further for Mr. Doran? Okay. Mr. Doran, Mr. Bradley. Sorry.
Feels like Mr. Doran some days.
Yeah, Mr. Doran's not bad either. I take that back. I'm not sorry. Amy Bronhardt from Henry Lord up next. Thanks, Amy.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Superintendent, and committee. Thank you for having us here. So on behalf of the Henry Lord Bulldogs, I'm here to speak about our budget and our projections for next school year. As everybody knows, we are a turnaround school, still navigating our way out of turnaround. We are a pre-K through 8, servicing upwards of 800 kiddos on any given day. We are pretty full. To note, we are just about a 3-unit school. There is a position that I'm bringing forth today that will bring us right to the 3-unit school capacity across all of our grades, K through 8. In addition to that, we are a foundational L classroom, so we do have split foundational classrooms. We have a K1, a 2-3, and a 4-5. In addition to that, we also are the home of the low-functioning severe ASD program. We have 8 classrooms, K to 8, and then 3 classrooms in pre-K alone. 2 of those classrooms are part-day, half-day pre-Ks, and then 1 classroom is a full-day pre-K. So that being said, we've been working real hard at Lord, and our teachers have been working extremely hard as well. We've just come out of our turnaround school visit, and we've seen some nice improvements and really clear areas that we need to continue to grow as a school. As we're looking forward to next school year, thinking about some of the continued programs that we're also offering, we carry the regular art, phys ed, music classrooms for all of our kids, and in addition to that, we also have a STEM program. We developed that pipeline last year, so all kids get 2 additional periods of STEM or Project Lead the Way. So in grades K to 5, it's Project Lead the Way, K to 4 rather, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8 is where we roll out our ASU virtual reality grant that we were the recipients of the STEAM curriculum through our Verizon partnership. That was a competitive grant that we were able to receive and has really worked out well, providing an option for both fully remote and hybrid learners. So that's been a nice addition to this year at Lord. So as we're thinking about next year and our strategic approach to continue to make progress, just for program improvement and new positions, our 5th grade, we're adding a 5th grade position. That will bring us to the 3 units because we've had one little cohort of 2 kind of going through each year. We keep asking for class to get that one up to speed of being the 3 units. So beginning next year, the 5th grade, this new position will take us to the 3. In addition to that, we are looking to add a .5 ESL position. So right now, we have 2.5 ESL teachers, and with the need of just the increase in numbers and our kids who have transitioned out of foundational into the mainstream, we just need extra hands of support, and just the number of classrooms we have to cover, because we can't just put all of our ELL students or all of our special ed students in one of the 3 cohorts. In many cases, we need to shuffle them across a couple for equity purposes, so that just creates more classrooms that teachers need to be able to push in and support. So for both ESL, we're looking for a .5 to bring us to 3 full FTEs, and we are looking for 1 full-time inclusion teacher as well. Our numbers for our special ed inclusion students are rather large in our middle school, a little bit to be expected from our turnaround work. When those kiddos were with us as elementary babies, they did not get necessarily everything that they needed. So we have seen an increase of just larger numbers of special ed in our middle school. So we need to be able to support the needs of those kiddos a little bit differently. As we continue to move ahead, we are the other .5 to that guidance counselor position. Just to let the committee know, we do have 2 adjustment counselors already and 1 student support coordinator. So when I look at the need of guidance work, even to extend it in grades 5 through 8 at Lord, I feel pretty confident that with a .5 guidance counselor and the hand of my student support coordinator, that we'll have a good handle to be able to deliver a robust program that can compare to Cuss and Morton and Talbot. So I do feel confident with that .5 addition. In addition to that, we have 2 coaches at Lord. So I'm sure the committee has noticed in the last month or so, Henry Lord has had some transition in our administrative staffing. Our vice principal transitioned here to help support the Cuss Cougar family. And as a result of that, we had an opportunity to rehire a vice principal. And within that, we grew from within, and one of our coaches moved up to be the vice principal. Highly recommended, highly qualified, leaving a little bit of a hole in our coaching area, a gap that needs to be filled. And coaches are hard to come by. To find strong, quality teachers that can step in and do the work that needs to be done with teachers and really balance the emotional side of the work as well. We're just looking at restructuring our work in that we are looking to transition one of our coaches to a department head position. As you noticed, we've added a lot of staff to Lord in the last few years to be able to accommodate now up to the 800 students, and we have not added any additional administrators, particularly evaluating administrators. And so one of the things that our teachers are asking for is more observation and feedback so they can continue to improve, and we want to make sure that it's not just on the heels of evaluation, but more on the heels of teacher improvement and really building our tier 1 supports. So by transitioning the coach position to an administrative position in ELA and ESL, it will give us an opportunity to really focus in on the ESL needs across our building as well, and create a K-8 pipeline for support in ELA, ESL, and math science through our Dean of Teaching and Learning who's currently in the building. So that would bring us to 1 coach position to help leverage and support with the coaching model across all content areas for teachers who are still in need. In addition to that, we are also the recipients of the cluster coordinator position for our for our ASD program. We expect that to have really large dividends. The ASD program, again, has grown extensively at Lord, and to be able to attend to the needs of the kids and the staff in that program daily without disruption from other needs across the building will have truly impact on that work. In addition to that, because of our growing needs in the ASD program, we're also the recipients of another APE teacher through the Phys Ed and Health Department to be able to make sure that our kids in the ASD program are getting the direct service and supports that they need as well, and to also just help support with scheduling across the building to make sure contractually we're meeting the obligations that we need to for all teachers across the pipeline. And then in addition to that, the last piece would be the VILS coach. As a member of the VILS community, we had the option of having 5 full-time coaches as a district. We only went with 4 this past year, but we have requested to have a full-time VILS coach because the leveraging of the work that our VILS coach has done in the building has really been transformative for all grade levels, not just our middle school teachers. So that is essentially the additional positions noted in the budget for Henry Lord. And I think that pretty much sums up where we are forecasting for next year.
Ms. Larrabee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Bernhard. I appreciate all your efforts at Henry Lord. I think you're doing a dynamite job. But I do have to agree with Mr. Aguirre. You're both going for a 0.5 for the guidance counselor, okay? Doran has 480 kids with 2 SACs, as well as Henry Lord has, and 1 support coordinator as well as Henry Lord. But Henry Lord has 799 kids, and Doran has 480. So again, like Mr. Aguirre said, the equity, and I'm not trying to overstep, and I know what you guys need for your schools. You're very equipped in making those decisions, but I really do think that Mr. Aguirre is onto something when it comes down to equity. The amount of students, that's what, 300 students close? I mean, that's a big difference. And if you guys say you can handle it, but I do believe moving forward, we should maybe approach some way of approaching how to make these schools equal when it comes down to staff. So that's the only thing I just wanted to bring up, is that big difference in students and ratio in SACs. You know, I'm big on the SEL, and moving forward, I think we're going to need them. I think we're going to need them real bad. I think we're going to need all our staff immensely moving forward. But again, 0.5 guidance, I mean, if you guys think it's okay, if it's acceptable, I'm not going to disagree. But again, the equity part of it it's a little concerning, but that's all. I yield.
Anything further? Mr. Aguirre?
Yeah, just 2 questions. One is, or comment and a question. I made my point, I think, about where I think the equity piece is. Earlier on, I think it was Talbot that came before us, or Fonseca maybe, that had, it's a turnaround school, and they had conversions in there, and I see you have an ELA department head, the coach converting to a department head. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. All of our turnaround schools, in my opinion, when we have the resources that we currently have, shouldn't be using conversions necessarily. That's the term we use when we don't have resources. What I would like to do is look at potentially having both of those positions filled at a turnaround school, whether it be the Lord or any of the other ones. Along with that, I look at you still only have 3 instructional admin / coaching positions for 800 students. And I think that's just a further, exemplifies why I think the conversion shouldn't be a conversion, it should be an addition, because at a school with 800 students, you need more than 3 interventions, coaches / department heads, just in my opinion. My last question is what I've asked everybody else. Is there anything that you have on your wish list that didn't make it, or that you want to present to us that are things that, if money wasn't an object and we could give you some more, what it would be?
Well, I think everybody would have something in their back pocket lining up their next strategic initiative, right? But I will tell you, I think it's important to note that we have been receiving a ton of support from the Office of Instruction this year, really monitoring our turnaround plan and the successes and areas for growth. This past week, we experienced with our third-party consultant through the state, our turnaround school visit. We'll get a formal report coming out of that. And some of the work that we've already started to launch in conversation with the district, I have not had a chance yet to bring it to Dr. Malone directly, is some of the teacher leadership work at Henry Lord. We're now in a place that at every grade level, we've got teachers that have been with us and have been really digging into the Tier 1 pedagogy and can take on some of that leadership work. So at this point right now, I don't really have an immediate wish list, but I can envision maybe before the end of the year that would be the direction that Henry Lord's recommendations would come from our report from the state, just to continue to make progress, because the #1 thing on the turnaround report was about shared leadership and distributed leadership and making sure that teachers are part of that work, and that is where the teacher leader position comes into play, so that every single week it's teachers leading each other in the work around curriculum and planning and assessment, so that the coaches and the deans and the department heads can really push in for observation and feedback, whether that's formal or informal, to make sure that everything is playing out the way that we set it up to plan for before the lesson takes off on any given day. So I think we've got our irons in the right fire at this point. We know where we're headed. And we've had support from the administration up until this point with anything we've asked for. Even if it's outside of the budget season, we have very much been supported. So I feel confident that when the need arises, we can come back to the district and we'll get the same outcome.
Thank you. How are you?
Anything further? Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Barnard, thanks for coming tonight. Good job, as usual. Nothing really to ask, just to maybe make a comment and see what, you know, with everything kind of calming down with the pandemic and the rates are getting lower, and looks like we're going to be, more children will be going back to the schools. What kind of steps are we taking to maybe kind of improve the absentee rate with your school?
So
And I meant to ask that question to the gentleman from Doran as well.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up because I just in the back room said to Mrs. Shaw, hey, what school year are we in?
Okay.
Because I was looking at the date on there and I was just a little bit disillusioned. So one of the things in the very beginning of the pandemic, that's not an accurate attendance rate.
Okay.
So right now at Henry Lord, on any given week, we're seeing upwards of about 93 to 94% attendance across all cohorts. Back in September and October, it was very difficult to get a handle on virtually present, virtually absent, who was present. If we're counting 75% or more of classwork as present, how are we figuring that out? If kids do work after hours, how are we backtracking to give them credit for attendance? So I had to dig out my toolbox, dust off a couple of practices from the high school when I was up there, and by about November, late October, we got a really firm system of lock and step to get our attendance data accurate.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to just collect data to have data if it's not going to be accurate. So as of now, I don't know what my year-to-date average is, because really September and October, what's on the books isn't right.
Right.
But after that, we've been able to get it in a very effective approach, and as I said, we've been seeing upwards of about 93 to 94% attendance every week. So our kids are showing up, and if they're not showing up, we have a very strong system of after 3 absences and no C. It starts the ball rolling, and we get out there and we're chasing kids and leveraging all of the resources within our attendance officer, our nurse, our SRO, our adjustment counselors, who have also been very essential to that work.
All right, that's fine, and so that's not an accurate number, that's good. But if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I did forget to ask the gentleman from Doran about that, because it shows in the left column your attendance rate, and then in the right column, there's nothing there.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
so that wasn't updated on this sheet for some reason for Doran. We are in a similar situation. I think all of our schools were really doing a lot of that, sort of figuring out who's on first a little bit for that
Yep.
first month or two of school. The pattern that we've seen at Doran, and I think is also consistent with other schools, is we have excellent in-person attendance. We have very good cohort B attendance. And then we are struggling at times with the at-home hybrid students. So a lot of times we're spending a lot of our time making sure to get those kids off. It's not a week on, a week off. It's always on. You know, we just got to make sure they're engaged during that off, you know, that home week. So that's been the focus of our work over the past several months. Similarly, we have a system in place where if teachers see that a student is out for a certain amount of time, in addition to what they report in the SIS system, they send us a form that we then go and track down that student if they reach a certain threshold. So it's a very similar model as to what they have at Lord, it sounds like.
Okay, and that's fine, and I'm obviously going to ask the same question when Stone comes up, but I understand that we're in the middle of this pandemic, and again, hopefully the worst is over, so I get it. I know it's going to improve. I just want to make sure that, like, and you're already following up on it, so I thank you for doing that. I yield. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity on the topic of attendance, and I understand the explanation, Dr. Barnard, with September and October, because you're right, I think it was very convoluted to try to figure out how to weigh someone's participation and does it qualify as someone who was in school or not. When you dove into those numbers, though, I'm curious, particularly with both of your schools, given their location in the city, was there an issue of access? Because I know that we've sort of, the committee, the district, and I'm sure the schools have gone, stayed on the path where we've not only put Chromebooks in people's in students' hands, but also the hotspots and stuff. But when you dove into that, was it an issue of access, or what was the root, I guess, if you will, of those students chronically being absent? Was there any theme or anything that sort of jumped out and that we need to, as a district, take a closer look at, not just for your schools? And I don't want to put you on the spot, so if you don't have it, that's okay. I just, as we're talking about it, I'm just wondering to myself, you know, I know we thought we were going to address it by saying to students here are Chromebooks, here are hotspots for accessibility and access that other students may not have, given their income and other factors going on in their lives. But I thought we addressed those as a district, so I'm just curious what's leading to some of those numbers, if you know. If you don't, I'm not trying, just say you don't know, you don't have the information available, and we'll follow up maybe later on through the superintendent with that information, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I would just say, I think what we found during those first couple of months, so that, we had to get a lot of students up and running with the access, of course, whether it's the hotspot, the Chromebook. That went quite efficiently, though, so we were able to get those in students' and families' hands. For us at Doran, I think the challenge a little bit was, again, for those students during their sort of at-home weeks, we had to do a lot of messaging around, this isn't the spring. Like, just because you're at home doesn't mean that we're not still working and we're still engaging. In some cases, I think when families that were in the cohort B model, that's what they sort of signed up for. They knew that's what they were sort of committed to and engaged to daily school at home. And I think at least at Doran, some of our students and families just struggled a little bit with the back and forth. And so we had to do a lot of messaging as a school around, it's school all the time, it just looks different the weeks you're at home. And we have seen an improvement since trying to streamline that messaging.
Yeah, I would echo that, what Eric said. And I think the other part of it is that the C and D, all of our kids at home need some sort of learning coach to guide them. The kids are not just sitting at home, logging in and starting their day without any adult interaction. And so for families that chose the CD, I think the reality is if families were choosing to send their kids to school at the onset of this, they really wanted their kids in full day, but they would take whatever we could give them as a district. And so ideally, even our CD families, we've been working to take in as many CD kids as we possibly could fit within the safety guidelines just to alleviate that struggle at home for families. Because being an at-home learning coach takes effort and takes time out of the day, and I don't think all of our families had that ability.
And that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even thinking, you're right, with your age group, particularly the K to 5, you're right. If you don't have someone to make that reminder, hey, it's time to get up, have breakfast or whatever, prepare yourself for school, log on, then that's not happening probably, across your entire school. Which again, I guess feeds into, safely being able to put more students in there. And I'm glad it's not an access issue, because I thought we addressed that. I mean, particularly the messaging, I think, there's always going to be issues, I think, when we're trying to message certain expectations to our school population. But that coupled with, you're right, having somebody in that home responsible for, and you're right, if they were in that CD model, the chances are they would have loved to be in cohort A in all the time, but because of space constraints, they weren't able. So on those off weeks where they weren't in, I would imagine that's probably where some of that had cropped up. But I appreciate that.
And just a shout out too to all of our community partners. I feel like that can't be missed in this statement, right? All of our community partners, the Boys and Girls Club being one of them, People Incorporated, Family Services, everybody has stepped up to help support and provide places that are consistent and structured and.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you raised that, because it's true. I mean, we're looking at these chronically absentee rates, and they easily could be even 10 points higher than that or more, had it not been for some of the community outlets that families had access to on those days where they had commitments, whether it be work or whatever the case may be. Without those, I think those numbers could be drastically higher. So you're right. Appropriately acknowledge that, our community partners probably helped keep those chronically absentee rates where they are, even though they are eye-popping when you look at them. Could have been much worse, so.
And just keep in mind, that that even reads through December, so I think about how much stronger we've gotten since December as a district, right? So I'm feeling confident that we'll see growth, maybe not where we want it to be, but we will see growth by June.
No, and I would imagine, the atmosphere and the climate at the Henry Lord has been fantastic, as well as Doran. From my perspective, I don't hear a lot of issues cropping up from those schools, and so I would imagine as soon as those doors open up and access is there safely, the students want to be in the building, and particularly your students. they're going to want to be in the buildings more so than ever, given the time off that they've had, the loss that they've had in terms of the socialization and that support they get, I know from you and your team, as well as from Mr. Bradley and his team as well, and other teams across the district. So I look forward to that. I don't necessarily get too worked up regarding the absentee rate, because there are a lot of factors that play into that. But I think once it's safe to do so, when we open up the doors, those numbers will come back down. You still have that percentage of students that you had prior to COVID that I think just for whatever reason we'll be dealing with that. But these numbers, I think, are going to come back down to earth, hopefully as fast as the COVID testing will come back down as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
I do have one question for you, Amy. Whenever you're nice enough to take me for a tour of the building. Technology in the ASD rooms, well, how you fix for that?
So do you mean technology as in Chromebooks?
Chromebooks? No, anything that would assist.
So many of our kids, if they qualify for assisted technology, there's a process they have to go through the special education program. If you're talking about like the communicative devices.
Anything.
And then in addition to that, our middle school kids, they all have their own VILS devices, and we have put technology in the rest of our ASD classrooms so that teachers can use it as a center rotation.
Okay.
We've been up and running with as many of our technology programs that are applicable and appropriate for our ASD kids. We have embedded all of the access points for kids to have access to those programs as well. Okay. The academic needs of our kiddos are just different than their traditional grade age level peers. But the access is there, and we've been giving kids the technology to also utilize it in the classroom. In some cases, it does become a safety issue, because sometimes behaviorally things get a little bit more busy than we need them to be, and we don't want to have technology be wasted. But at the same time, teachers have been really good with leveraging it for kids that they know can access it and utilize it to extend their own programs.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a ton going on in those rooms, and I go in there, I'm like, but I just was wondering how you were fixed, if you needed anything there. You're fine?
Yeah, no, again, Michael Loesch has been great with the team chairs, and just James Sullivan is my go-to guy, so he's another one, just does a great job with us.
You
So.
can't beat that then.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next up, from the Stone School, Mary Ellen Shaw.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all in person, especially. This doesn't happen very often lately, but so I am happy to present my 10th budget here as a principal at Stone School. Right now, we are a K-12 day school, a therapeutic day school. Our kids are coming to us from all over the district. I think we have students from every school who have come to us from every school in the district. We also have a number of students who come to us from out of district. This year in particular, we've gotten quite a number of calls asking for out of district placements in our program. Right now, we have 73 students. Throughout the year last year, we served 90 students in total, which was a 15% increase from the year before. Right now, at this point, we are at 83 students, and every day right now that everybody else is coming back, our numbers are going up and up and up. Right now, we have 7 students who we are paid tuition. 2 additional students are joining us this week. They were specifically reached out to me and asked if we would be willing to take their kids. So we'll have 9 tuition students. Right now, we have 3 elementary school classrooms, 4 middle school, 4 high school classrooms. My high school is jam-packed. My middle school is almost packed, and I am rapidly filling my elementary this week. We are a cohort A school, so our kids have primarily been in school. We started at about 65%. Now we're over 80% of our kids who are face-to-face all year. We have 1 cohort C kid. We have 1 hybrid student because, as Amy shared, it just was not a workable solution. We tried to get all of our students to come back because we felt due to their therapeutic needs, it was absolutely critical for them to be in the building with us so that we could make sure that they were safe and having their needs met. We have 93% of our K-5 kids in person, 77% of our 6 to 8, and only 59% of our 9 to 12. That is a tough group. What I'm finding with my 9 to 12 grade students is, as I've gone to visit and check in and find out what's going on, a lot of them are working. Their families are having difficulty financially, and so a lot of these kids are working and not absolutely able to be logging on as much as they should be. We've tried a lot of different creative solutions. I'm doing work after school with some of the kids, virtually, trying to get them at least through some of their credits. We are doing a lot of dropping off of materials so that the kids can access paper materials whenever they can. It's unfortunate. The unfortunate part of that is that it does show as a hit on our attendance, because the kids may go for weeks without completing any of that work or bringing it to us. But then when they call us, we go and they've done a month's worth of work and they didn't actually get credit. So it's kind of a difficult situation. So I feel that our attendance numbers, just to answer your question, are not accurate at all, because it doesn't really show the amount of work that kids are doing that they're not getting credit for because they're not sitting in front of us. Our attendance, 67% of our remote kids are chronic absences. So our other kids who are face-to-face are coming to school every day. We've had, I think, today we had one face-to-face student out, and that is pretty typical for us. It's our kids that are working from home. And like I said, the high school kids, when we dug in, we discovered that it was really a need that they provide some service, some help to their parents, and so that's kind of playing against them. We've spent the year, we've been blessed to be able to work very, very closely with the Office of Instruction in the areas of math and English. We don't have, my teachers are all special ed teachers, so we're not necessarily content-specific teachers. So they've been working with my teachers and with 2 teachers in particular who are also helping the other teachers to become stronger in their individual content areas. And that has been an amazing change for us this year. We have also been working, we've done a lot of work this year for SEL skills. Our kids came back some of them came back in pretty tough shape, need a lot of additional supports. We spent a lot of time in the summer doing outreach and supporting kids, and we're still doing that, and I can see that the need is going to be even more when everybody starts coming back. Every parent I have called in the past 2 days when I said, are you interested in having them come back full-time yet, has said, oh yes, absolutely. But we do have, again, it's my K to 8 will all be back. It's my 9 to 12 that I'm really worried about. But I understand from that perspective, from the parents' perspective, that they need support. So when you look at our budget, the only thing that we are asking for this year is the support of a 0.5 school adjustment counselor. We don't have a school adjustment counselor at this time, and it is something that is beneficial for us in terms of drawing other people in. I think the school adjustment counselor has kind of a different perspective than our behavior therapist does, and I think it will help us to build our skills a little bit. We're also going to hopefully have a 0.5 use of the BCBA that is on the special ed budget, and that's what we're asking for this year. So if anybody has any questions? Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Sure. So that, we originally budgeted a half and half. Remember when Sylvia came and presented and we looked at numbers and we said Sylvia gets their own sack? Stone's getting theirs as well.
Okay.
So when I told you guys last week that I had Sylvia and Stone written down as sacks, that's in my discussion for after this meeting to say what I would propose to the committee in terms of changes based on all these discussions.
Mr. Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Principal Short, the 7 paid tuitions and 2 additional coming, so you get 9. What's the tuition rate?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I couldn't find it.
Kevin's got it.
Mr. Almeida?
It's just about $40,000.
40,000 per kid.
40,000?
40,000 per kid, right?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
it is per kid.
Right, so I'm glad you preempted me, because I was going to say, if we're collecting $360,000 in tuitions, we can fund a full-time SAC for your school. It's an investment into your program. There are needs there, and we shouldn't be, so, he beat me to it, but I was going to make the point that if we're drawing in tuitions from other districts, and that's a substantial amount of money, that we can fund a full-time SAC for your program, which clearly is a program investment that's much needed, not just for this year, but going forward.
Absolutely.
And I see the trend of out-of-district students coming into your program growing, not reducing, so the need may be greater as time goes on. But I appreciate that. You know, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how, you know, the district could assist with your high school population, because that just, I don't know. I'm sure other members are sitting here feeling as though that kind of kills us, that students are drawn from the education, essentially to go back, we used to have years and years ago.
Exactly.
Where students were the primary, you know, breadwinner, if you will, or needed to be a breadwinner in that family unit. And so I know these are tough times. I'm hoping that things will get back on track economically for those families. And in the meantime, just that loss of their presence in that building is difficult. So I applaud you for trying to, you know, do the things you are with paper, you know, packets, if you will. But if there's something we can do through the summer with some of the funding that's coming our way, I think is specifically for the mental health piece. And so if we can offer some stuff in the summertime to work around their schedules, I guess, if you will, their work schedules, which may be in and of itself difficult. If they're working, depending on how many hours, now you add school to that as well.
Right. Exactly.
But if there's something you think that the district can do to assist or support in that regard, then and certainly I would ask you to bring that forward through the Office of Instruction or certainly through the superintendent, so that we may be able to be a part of that. But that was troublesome for me to hear.
Yeah.
I know it's reality.
Right.
You know, I don't think, you know, other districts across the state, unless they're urban districts or gateway cities, probably are dealing with that. And I think that gets lost on those who make decisions when they fly at, you know, 40,000 feet and we
Right.
are flying down here at ground level. So, but keep up the good work. I'm glad to see we're going to be able to assist your program this year and going forward. And if there's anything, like I said, programmatic that you think you need to assist with that population, then I would ask you to advocate for that.
I
through
do
the
think
channels.
that we're at a position right now, and I've been talking a lot with my guidance counselor, we're in a situation where it's absolutely imperative for us to think way outside the box for our kids. I have a small little cohort of my own that comes in after hours, and I do a few hours of tutoring with them, trying to kind of get them over the hump. And we've thought about, well, could we, I was asking Rob Correa about evening school. My kids aren't going to go there. They're not comfortable enough to do that. So I'm feeling, you know, I feel very much that we have to start getting creative about credit recovery options that are after school. They'll work with us because they trust us, but we're going to have to work around, like you said, their schedules. The reality is some of these kids have to help at home, and that's just the way it is. And I am not at all interested in seeing any of my kids drop out. Nobody has. They want to make it. They want to graduate and do something a little bit different. And we're just now really starting those conversations about what is that going to look like and how do we staff it, and, you know, how do we make sure that, you know, the district is covered in terms of liability when we have kids coming in after hours, you know, and they're just hanging out in the principal's office. But right now, I'm just saying we're doing what we can, but we need to do it on a bigger scale.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Aguirre first.
So I agree with that, your last point that you make about students that have to work, and, you know, especially if they have the capacity to learn the material, they bounced around, they have been in and out of school.
Right.
So students that can actually learn the material, what do we do with those students? I've always been a proponent that we need to lobby the state to offer allow schools to offer the equivalent of like a high set / what used to be GED.
Yeah.
So that students can come in, prove that they can master the material, take the class, pass the class, without us telling them you have to drop out in order to get those resources.
Right, right.
That, to me, is a lousy decision for a counselor to be in. But many students that they know the material, they could learn the material. If we tell them, it's going to take you 1 year to get through this, or you got to sit through 4 years of credits, we know what happens at that point. So whatever we can do to keep pushing that, I tell the legislatures that all the time, but we really should make that change. My only comment on the adjustment council, I do agree with it. I think the behavior therapist model that I know you have here in the building, and I don't even know any of the people that are in those positions, but I think therapeutically you need certified therapeutic folks. And going the route of a school adjustment council, I think makes that a little more, or a certified BCBA. Somebody that has different types of credentials. It's not being critical of any of these folks. It's just that you need experienced therapeutic type folks in a therapeutic school. So that would be one of my suggestions. The only other one is, and I've mentioned this in the past, we as a district, I think, need to have some sort of clinician or psychiatrist on staff where we can have these kids get service, because I can only imagine you're having a hard time finding counselors, medication changes, the variety of things that you see. I think we need to look, and you talk about thinking outside the box, but we've been saying this for a long time. That's something that I think the district needs to have. I know Dr. Brownhard talked about a connection that she made it individually on her school, but I just think district-wide, it's high time that we put somebody on along that. But keep up the good work. I know you're doing a good job there, and whatever we can do to help, I'm here for you. Thank you.
Ms. Larrabee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Principal Shaw. Just quickly, exactly what Mr. Costa and Mr. Aguirre was saying is what I was going to state as well. As you know what I do as a profession, and you hit the nail right on the head. If you were to sit Mr. Damaris and Rob from RPA and have all three of you sitting up there, I'm confident that they have the same exact obstacle with these high school kids. I'm seeing it, I'm living it, and I'm trying to deal with it as well. It's very difficult to see these kids kind of fall off the ends of the earth and not be able to find them and contact them and speak with them. With that being said, everything that they basically said, whatever you need from us, summer ideas, initiatives, please just let us know. I'm on board for anything. I'll sit down with you because I'm dealing with the same thing. And
We should collaborate.
Yeah, it's
Some of the after-school stuff.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the teenager right now is a different beast.
Yes.
It's different hurdles, it's different obstacles, it's different.
And they're
than what
feeling that
Right,
intense
right.
pressure. They really are.
And their
Yeah.
responsibilities also are vastly different from our younger students. And I think everybody in this room can understand that there definitely has to be some thinking out of the box to rally around these kids and get them back. Because they do want to succeed. Exactly what you said, they do want to succeed. But other responsibilities are hindering that. And God bless you. It takes a special person to do what you do every day, and I admire you. Keep up the good work, and if you ever need anything from myself, I'm not really going to speak for everybody else, but I'm here for you. I'm here for the kids at Stone, and good luck.
I have to say, everybody has always been
Right.
so supportive of our kids. I've never doubted that at all.
Right. Got a good group here.
Mr. Malone?
I yield.
Mr. Malone?
Thank you.
So two things. One, I think moving the Stone into the West Hall building was one of the best decisions the committee made. And I'm appreciative of the fact that we've been able to grow. And it's really one of the district's great success stories, is the work that's happening at Stone. So Ms. Shaw's a wonderful building leader, but more importantly, having her on the district leadership team helps me. So her advice and counsel with my work and then with the rest of the principals is always well received. Now, each of these three has very challenging populations to the separate program in your school and her entire school. So, this is the heart of the work, and in many ways, she at some point may interact with kids from both of these buildings at various times. So being part of that district team and making the Stone an integral part of it is great. Mark, 3 years ago, we were complaining about, years and years ago, we talked about bringing kids in from the outside. It's good to see that we got that going. It's a profit bearer, but it really, at the end of the day, it helps us get stronger. So I really appreciate you continuing to grow that. The final part, we're talking with Mr. Loesch, and now that we have Dr. Taylor, about what it would mean to contract services with a psychiatrist, just like we do with attorneys. So you'll hear more from us about this. I just don't have it in the budget as a position request, because it's different than just hiring a psychiatrist, because it's a position that systems don't necessarily own. They contract services. So stand by. You'll hear more from us, but you're absolutely right. We're going to need to get more services in that regard.
Okay. I do have one question before I turn it over to the Vice Chairman. Mary Ellen, do you have any kind of money for after-school programs? When you say people are coming in on odd hours, do you have any kind of a fund that you could keep an English teacher or Beth Rogers to stay after with kids if you wanted to supplement them on a Tuesday or next week on a Wednesday?
I don't have anything set. I'm going to say this, though. I feel that if I reached out and asked, that I would be able to get that. Right
Yeah.
now, it's a specific group of kids who I've had since kindergarten at, at Fonseca.
Right.
So they work well with me, so I'm just kind of going with
Yeah,
it
no,
to try to get them through.
No, you're not
so.
going with it. You talk to him, you set up a
No,
fund
I
to
know
help
he
you.
will.
No, Mary
Yeah.
Ellen, please, because you're driving around the streets looking for kids at night. You get some help. Get some help on certain days when you want to bring in a few more extras. And if
But how many times have you done that this year?
Yeah.
I mean, she does that. At least
Okay.
once a week, she's out at 10
I
o'clock
know,
driving
I know,
around.
I
So
don't want that.
There's no issue with
No, you can help her out with stuff like that.
right, but we
No, I know.
always do.
Okay, but you
I
can
can
get
do
a few people some extra spending money, and you can also help the kids.
Okay.
And then the
Okay.
access to the credit recovery stuff that the other schools are
Yes,
using at the high school level.
absolutely.
That's an easy way, that's an easy
Right.
win.
Okay. Mr. Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Principal Shaw, how many students are we talking, 9 to 12?
Right now, we have 28.
28. Of those 28, how many of them fit into that situation you explained to us where
I would
the needs are
say,
greater in their
I'm
home life than,
aware-
I'm
I'm
sorry?
aware of at least 10 that I'm aware of. Others that I suspect is based on their demeanor and their, the way they look when they come to school, but I'm aware of 10.
May I, through the chairman? Mr. Almeida, that tuition money that's coming into the district, right, is there any restrictions on those funds? I'm sorry?
No.
Not at all. Well, you saw. Hopefully that's your microphone on your computer. So there aren't any, okay. Well, we can have further discussions, going forward on it. I was just curious. I didn't believe there were any. I mean, obviously, that's the sort of, supplement, I guess, with the district's funding for the program and for the building itself, but maybe there's an opportunity there to further assist it. Obviously, we can talk about collectively as a group with the administration, but thank you. I yield.
Yeah, Mary Ellen, I'll go back to it again, even like a Saturday school program. If you need to supplement some time for those kids, I mean, you get a few teachers to come in, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I know you're flexible enough to figure it out, so
Yeah,
don't worry about money, please.
What's that?
I said, you're flexible enough to
No, she
figure it
wanted the
out, don't worry
last
about
piece you
money.
That's what she was wanting. She wanted to reiterate the last piece. Don't worry.
No, not for that,
Nice job, Principal
not for
Shaw.
those guys. Anybody have anything else? Thank you, guys, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Athletics, no, next up is RPA. Mary Ellen.
Mr. Chairman? Can we please get whoever's here, as I mentioned last time, and have them sit here so we don't have to have waits
I
to...
agree. Let's go, guys. With Mr. Craig. He's up next. Excuse me. Anyway, yeah, 1, 2, 3.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
So, okay, to continue on, in order off the agenda is the Resiliency Preparatory Academy. Mr. Correa.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, the Mayor, Superintendent Malone, School Committee. My name is Rob Correa. I'm here for the Resiliency Preparatory Academy. I'm the principal. It's a 7 through 12 alternative school for the city. And the school that we, excuse me a second, sorry. Our school is 7 through 12, and we're in cohorts. 7 through 9 is a cohort, and 10 through 12 is a cohort. The school currently has an enrollment of 236 students. We have approximately 80 students in the middle school cohort, and we have 156 in the high school. The high school has another element to it. It's the Evolve program. And out of that 156 students, we have 26 in the Evolve program. And we focus on social emotional learning there at the high school and at the middle school so that we can take these students who are emotionally fragile and reluctant learners, and we try to mend their educational ways. And we've had some great success. Our population, however, has 39% SPED to it. We have a 39 SPED component, which is one of the reasons I'll be asking for another special educational teacher to meet that need within the school. We also have 12% L, and that L population is taken care of by the L teacher that we have. That's pretty well supported by the staff that's there right now. Along with the request for additional help, I'm looking for a lead teacher in science. This way it can help the curriculum, in math. This way it can help the math curriculum be supported. The teachers will be supported in the math. We have a department head who was working on all 4 disciplines, which is quite a task. And when we take a look at what her specialty is at, it's English and social studies, the humanities, and we're lacking for some type of leadership in the math area. So hopefully the request for a lead math teacher will be honored. I am also requesting a STEM teacher. So we can have a STEM teacher for grades 7 through 12. This would allow another avenue for the school to have additional resources by using the Project Lead the Way. Hopefully we can improve the science that's going on in RPA by introducing this new instructor. And it would also align with the rest of the district. In the middle school, the middle schools have teachers that are doing Project Lead the Way, and when the students are transferred from the middle schools to RPA, we have no common thread to that. So we're hoping to create that common thread so there's continuity for those students that enter RPA and wish to transfer back to the middle school if appropriate. That's about all.
That's it. Okay, thanks, Mr. Correa. Any questions for Mr. Correa? Mr. Aguirre.
Thank you. Just a question on the Evolve. In looking at this, we haven't had a subcommittee meeting, so I would have asked these questions probably at that, so I apologize for asking them here. But What is the staffing in the Evolve, and do they interact with the whole school? How does that work for,
There's a core group of students that apply for the Evolve program. And right now, they have a capacity of 28, but they have 26. And they have 4 core teachers in that program.
and then what about the workers? So is it a separate, I know we talked about this a year ago at the subcommittee meeting, that the Evolve program was going to be basically a totally separate, once we get the grant, and it was basically not going to be, it was a school within a school, basically, so.
And that's correct, Mr. Aguirre. It is a school within a school. They have their own curriculum that they follow, and it does meet the mass standards, so that the core is followed throughout the year.
So when I'm looking at the budget here, it says School Adjustment Counselor Evolve. That person deals with 26 kids total?
Correct.
No more?
No more.
And I see also a budget issue here of the second department head is .6 operating. It's paid about .6 out of the operating budget.
Yes, that's the coordinator of the Evolve program. That person was a guidance counselor, full-time guidance counselor for RPA, and the block grant pays a portion of her salary now.
Yep.
That she's the coordinator. I will have to say, I do want to say that the SAC that is in the Evolve program is paid for by the block grant.
Yep, no,
That's why they service just those 26 students.
I understand. Just, we talked earlier, and you weren't in the room, but we were talking about equity across all the schools and caseloads and the like. So it's fair, I got to be fair and ask those questions, that if we see, whether it's paid for by the bar grant or whatever grant, if we got a full-time adjustment counselor dealing with only 26 students, we got to start questioning how much money is being spent on one particular program. Where I was asking about the .6, and I hadn't seen this until I was able to look at it today, the director of it says head of options on the budget, .6 is coming out of the operating budget. So it leads to the question of how much is 60% of that person's time being utilized at RPA, or is it 100% of the time being used in the Bar Foundation? That's why I asked the first question about that.
Her time is being spent at the Evolve program, 100%.
Yep, I understand. And the position, the special education teacher, I know last year we had an issue with, did we have enough or did we not? You have plenty of students in need down there, so I wholly support that. So with that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anything further from Mr. Correa? Off easy there, Rob. Mr. Buston, the athletic department budget, please.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. So we're looking to add to our middle school program. We're looking for a co-ed volleyball program in the fall, and a swimming program that would run in the winter. Could be the winter, could be in between the winter and the spring season. Also adding elementary school cross-country during the fall season, and outdoor track and field in the spring season. Looking for a line item just for high school sports, for uniform replacements, pretty much what we spend right now. And also to provide uniforms for middle and elementary schools. And we would collect those uniforms at the end of the season, so there'd be a one-time cost of that. We're in the process of getting quotes for that right now. Also, $10,800 for the huddle package. We use huddle right now in sports, but we do not have the complete package. And this complete package would also include cameras. A camera would be installed in the field house, and a camera would be installed outside at the football field. And we could videotape practices, sub-varsity games, and we'd be able to live stream that out to people for every game that we wanted to. The varsity games would still probably be run by Fred TV, but just the ability to, especially with COVID now, we found that live streaming becomes pretty important, and to be able to live stream the JV and the freshman games, that's a big opportunity that we have with this package. And also, coaches can videotape their practices. They can go home and they can watch it on their computer, They can send it out to everybody on their team. The kids on the team can make a highlight reel just of their performance, and they can send that out to colleges. So the huddle package is a pretty interesting, and it's a great opportunity for our student athletes. And that's about it. That's pretty much all the additions that we're looking for.
Any questions for Mr. Aguirre?
Thank you for your presentation. I wholeheartedly agree with the videotaping piece. I've watched some of the games from home, and it's better than nothing at some point with the, sub-varsity or a student doing it or whatever, but this is technology that's there, clear as day, that we should be having this at a school like Durfee. What I would suggest to the administration is that this funding should come out of the TV, the revolving account, because we have money in that account, so that if they need, to be supplemented, we can always do that. But at the end of the day, you want to get it done. You don't really care where it comes from, but to the administration, I would suggest you look into the TV portion of that. And if you need more, having been a coach, it's a pain in the neck to try to get a video, and you got a tripod, you got a kid doing it. We're trying to make it Division I, the fields, everything else. So, this goes along with it. The expansion into the elementary, that's across multiple sports, right? Seasons or whatever. It's not just, I know you have a couple here, but it's basically going to be as often as we can, or is there a need for more? Are the requests more than what we can offer, basically, is what I'm getting at?
Well, elementary, we were looking for something that would be feasible at all the schools, as far as like their facilities, what they can do, what they can't do. Cross-country is something we can get the kids running pretty much anywhere and get them involved. We have that summer track program before COVID. The summer track program was doing very, very well. So we kind of want to get that going. In the middle schools, it's great in the middle school. We have sometimes over 100 kids that run in the middle school program. So we wanted to get that going at the elementary school program. We were thinking soccer and stuff, but soccer has a feeder system with the Forever Youth Soccer Program, and that goes on in the fall too. So kids were having to make a choice of whether do I go to my Forever Youth Soccer game, or do I go to my middle school game? So we didn't think soccer was that big of a need at the elementary school level, because again, there is a feeder system there.
Yeah, my only comment on that would be is don't get stuck on the budget, from speaking for myself. If there's programs that these kids want, or you guys think that you should run, come back to us for more funding, because the more of these programs that run, the better off the kids are going to be, the better off the city's going to be. So
yeah, I
support you 100%. Thank you. I yield.
Yeah.
Anything further? Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, great presentation, Brad, thank you. And I agree with Mr. Aguirre as far as the funds. We'll definitely help out if there's any interest in additional programs. But a couple things, just real quickly. I'm just looking at the program improvement for girls lacrosse, and it's in parentheses JV. Is that just based on what the interest is for the girls at that particular age?
I'm sorry, say that again?
It just says here for high school expansion for the program lacrosse,
yeah.
JV, for girls.
Yeah.
Is that just because that there's interest there for that particular set of like maybe freshmen or sophomores and juniors right now?
Yeah, this has been talked about for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Our biggest drawback right now is the field space.
Mm-hmm.
With the expansion, when they do knock down the current high school and they build that other field, that's going to open up a whole nother area, because lacrosse is a spring sport.
Yep.
And I know the baseball field and softball field has been a big discussion. Right now, and for the past couple of years, the baseball team and softball team, they've been practicing on that back turf field. They've been able to do infield work in there. They can't hit, but they've been able, because that's a dry field. So that field is being used right now. When we do get the new field with the expansion, we will have a place for lacrosse to go. And there's been interest from girls.
Yeah, there has.
We've had some phone calls, some emails,
Yep.
people interested in girls lacrosse. Something that we're definitely we're going to get going next year is maybe a club or even a JV team. I know Brockton High School is in the process. They're in their 4th year of trying to get it going, and it's been a little bit of a struggle for them,
Right.
keeping the numbers up. And again, the big thing is a feeder system. I know Dr. Malone has done a great job as far as getting it into the phys ed, getting it into the elementary and middle school phys ed programs. So at least they're introducing lacrosse to them. and then getting it up at the high school is something that I think, you know, it's going to be there in the future, yeah. Because we'll have the field and, you know, we'll have the funds to do it.
Sure. No, I'm glad Dr. Malone is, you know, incorporated that in the lower levels. I did talk to him a couple years about that, not a couple, maybe a year and a half ago about that. And I'm glad to see that that's being added. And I think, too, that once you start adding that, like you said, you're going to probably see more anticipation or an interest in that particular sport. Because I think that's something that's been kind of absent in this area in a high school level for whatever reason. I don't understand it, but I'm glad it's in there. The only other thing I wanted to ask you about was the trainer supply at that line item. That's enough? That's a good number?
Yep.
Just seems low to me. I don't know why. It just,
Yeah,
okay.
That's been adequate.
Okay.
She gets pretty much everything she needs.
Yep. Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anything further? Thank you, Mr. Buston. Budget for the high school, Mr. Damaris.
I don't know if you saved the best for last, or I'm not sure, but I'm happy to be here and happy to be able to discuss with you plans for Durfee High School. We're building a new school, and as we enter next year, we got to be ready for the future. We got to be ready to take that next step, and, you know, recognizing all the challenges that we're all up against in these times, we can't stop thinking about that bright future, and we can't not be ready when we take that step into those doors next year. So I'm very, very excited to talk about some of these new proposals with you this evening. And I say all of that within the reality of the fact that Durfee is also in turnaround. You know, you heard from a couple of other turnaround principals today, and when you think about Fall River's middle school level, 3 of the 5 sending schools in Fall River Public Schools are in turnaround themselves. So that certainly has an impact in terms of what we need to do and what we need to accomplish for all students. So when we think about the turnaround practices of leadership, instruction, support, and culture, those were the areas that guided us as we thought about what we needed for Durfee High School and building programs, enhancing programs, continuing work, deepening work. So on Durfee's hard budget, you see a number of new positions proposed and a few conversions. So I'll go through each of these and, you know, as briefly as I can, articulate rationale. When we start with bringing back the position of the associate principal, I know that's something that's been on the budget, it's left the budget, it's a proposal at this point because it's much needed. If you look at the organizational structure at Durfee High School and the hierarchy, after the principal, it's pretty flat. And so in terms of supervision over other administrators, the next level down, I have all peer administrators, VPs, department heads, directors are all at the same level in the union. This would give me the opportunity to really drive instruction and operations at the same time. Right now, I have someone in that role by way of the Director of Operations, Shana Morgan, and she's serving really in both roles, okay? And I think that the time is now to really put our foot on the gas pedal for instruction at Durfee High School. The numbers need to move, right? That's when no one's going to argue about that. What we would propose is to take the Director of Operations position and convert it to a second shift. We don't have a name for it yet, but a second shift administrator. We're looking to expand the operational hours at Durfee High School with Durfee After Dark Vocational. Down the road, we hope to talk about a twilight program for overaged ELL students that need to work during the day. And we got this new building that shouldn't shut down at 3 o'clock, right? 12-hour operation, 15-hour operation. As we look at these things, if you give me the leeway, I'm going to run with it, and we're going to deliver some results for Durfee High School. Another conversion that I'm hoping you would support is converting our lead guidance counselor to a guidance department head. With the Director of Guidance, Mr. Woodward, in his role being elevated to a district position, a lot of what he handled at Durfee falls to the lead guidance counselor, and it's a lot. And the more that he's expanding the program, and it's all great work, the less we have his service with boots on the ground. And this is a much-needed piece to really drive that guidance curriculum and really build on the good work that's happened over the last several years. We're asking also for another adjustment counselor, so that would bring the total to 9 for the school, but it would be specifically give each grade level 2 guidance counselors, 2 adjustment counselors to focus on the need. With this particular position, we'd be looking for someone with multiple language capacities. Certainly, Spanish and Portuguese are much needed. So, and the candidates are out there as we've looked over the last few years. We're asking for the addition of a second librarian. If you've toured the school, you see how massive that space is. And really, we want it to be a very vibrant place of learning. There's going to be a lot of collaboration going on in there. And I won't speak for Dr. Malone, but because he's not in the room, I'll say this, is that he also has intentions of having our current librarian assume some district-wide responsibilities to establish libraries across the district. Another ask is a lead teacher for special ed. We do have one right now. I know this has been a big part of the conversation tonight. We would be looking for our current lead teacher in SPED to stay focused on inclusion, and then this second lead teacher would have their attention on the sub-separate populations. 2 very different worlds, 2 different skill sets, and right now with Durfee High School, 19% of the student population is special education. I think it's a much-needed position. We're also asking for a second behavior therapist. We have one focused on grade 9. We'd be looking to add an additional one to focus on grade 10. We're seeing that transition for a lot of kids in their behavior to high school isn't quite complete before the end of the 10th grade. In terms of main office staff, we're asking for the establishment of an administrative assistant position. This would be a higher capacity delivery of services for support from me in the main office. And we would ask that we take the clerk position that's in the main office currently and convert that to a special education clerk. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of deadlines in the special education world, and there's definitely a lot of work to be done there. Excuse me. I believe I've covered everything that's on the hard budget for Durfee. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Damaris. How are you?
I'm all right tonight. How are you?
Good, thanks. So, I mean, obviously, we talked about brand-new building that we have coming on board for next school year. You know, looking at some of the requests that you've made, I mean, they're reasonable requests, but other needs for a building such as the one that you're going to walk through the doors in September on, I mean, I just see that, I mean, obviously the building we're in now is a massive building, but just in terms of resources, have you had those conversations? Are there other needs? And I know other departments will probably push in services, whether it's custodial or security, et cetera, but maintenance. But in terms of the operation of the school, you feel as though coming from the building we're in now into the new building, that you have all the nooks and crannies staffed appropriately, or do you anticipate there are other needs?
If you talk on operations side, I think that...
Talking operations side, I mean, and again, and I know that there'll be some resources coming in from other departments to assist there, and that's great. Let me just open it up to either or, both operations and I guess educationally from that standpoint. I know some of these asks will, particularly the media specialist for the library. I was in there the other day. I mean, it's just a huge area. I mean, it's mind-blowing, the size of the media center. So obviously that makes sense to make sure there's an additional person there to assist with that. And quite frankly, I'm not sure 2 can get it done based on the space there. But if 2 is what you're asking for now, I guess it can be evaluated going forward, whether there's a greater need. Because I see that center as not only just being a place where students can go quietly and study on their own, but It looked like there were a couple of areas that may have been breakout classrooms or spaces that maybe individual instruction can be done in there. So there's certainly greater needs, but do you foresee anything that you haven't asked for that you may sort of have on the horizon?
Well, there are other positions that we could talk about, and Dr. Malone, I don't know if he's already part of his presentation, but I know that there's some positions that may be funded by grant, okay, with the emergency monies, but I think what you're asking is a different question, and I can see down the road a need for some more staffing, particularly in the 3 to 7 range, you know, where after hours, you know, I really want to see more programming coming in. As we develop the restaurant and the salon, I think that there might be a need for someone to manage the public as they're coming in, and to promote it, to get out into the business world and, you know, dovetail maybe with our marketing students and get that facility humming. And then, you know, events that can happen in conjunction with the auditorium. So I think some operations folks, the first step would be that conversion of a second shift administrator. So we have someone on site that has the capacities of a vice principal or a principal and can, you know, have the vision to run programs, but also handles the situations that may happen.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the hours of operation. I mean, that's going to be a building that the city of Fall River is going to be paying for years to come with the debt exclusion. That building should be humming for not just 8 hours a day. We shouldn't be locking the doors and sending everyone out of it at 3 o'clock. I mean, if we have programs that we can implement and put students in there in the afternoon or early evening, I want to see that building get as much use as it can out of it, because I don't know that the investment would be there if you're just going to use it for traditional schooling and then shut it down. I mean, if it's a great building, I just want to make sure that we're not going to have a Mercedes up there with a lawnmower engine in it. And so I just want to make sure whatever you need to make that building tick and hum for those hours, to make sure that the taxpayers are getting every dollar spent out of that building and the resources that it can provide for our city, I want to make sure that we're doing that. It doesn't make sense to have a beautiful brand-new school up there and then have restricted hours where programs aren't extending into the afternoon and evening. So if there are things that you need, let's start talking about planning for those either in upcoming budget or in future budgets so that we can maximize that new building to its fullest potential. That's the direction I was heading in when I'm thinking of what the needs are and how you're going to be able to utilize that building. As I'm listening to you, I think we're on the same page in terms of what you've envisioned that school to be going forward.
And I think if you put that concept on our current structure, I would be asking you for many more people to physically just manage it because of the way it's laid out.
Right.
But because of the smart design with our architects, through the input that we gave them, saying, hey, we want a traditional structure that we can monitor and give us the innovations in the classrooms. So I think, you know, with doors that can lock and you know, straight hallways, 450 cameras, and the design, you know, the way it's laid out is that the building's going to be much more easily monitored, and especially with the visibility, with the glass all over the place. When we talked about offices, I said, anybody that has an office near a corridor, I want a window so that if it's an administrator, if they're doing some work at the desk, they can also monitor a corridor. So, you know, I think that it's a different kind of ask, right? And so I think some of it's going to come down the road as we build these programs.
Yeah, I just don't want those programs to be prohibited by the need for those positions. I want to be ready for them so that if you see the need and you can roll it out, you're ready to go day one, ready to roll it out, as opposed to, we would have loved to have had X, Y, or Z. However, we haven't budgeted for it. That'll be a future ask. That may be next year's ask. Because again, once those doors opened up, I want that building used, as well as I'm sure everybody around this table. We want the city to have full access in terms of all the potential it has. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Damaris. I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleague, Mr. Costa, as well. I want to be able to take full advantage of the Durfee, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts on what you think you can do with Durfee moving forward with the Twilight program, After Dark, vocational programs, the restaurant. I mean, it's got a lot of potential, and I definitely want to see it used completely and as much as we can. So if there's anything you need from this committee, you know, I think you'll have our support. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Anything further? Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's a very good point that you brought up, Matt, and I'm glad you're at the helm. You're doing a very good job. But those operational, with the auditorium and the after-school programs that you're going to implement, that won't stop it. We can do that with the new fields as well, correct? Okay. Like MIAA, if they decide to maybe use the pool now, we can use that particular pool for playoffs, or MIA playoffs as well. That won't stop at the fields, right?
No.
Okay. The other thing too is I talked maybe about I think it might have been the last budget, and I know it's probably on your back burner right now because of the pandemic, but have you kind of tweaked a little bit with I don't know if you remember with the suspension issue that you were talking about as far as after school, or is it going to be, do you remember that particular stuff?
So we were looking at some kind of diversion from suspension program
Right.
with the district to set up a separate site. And if you have a program that a student can go to get academics and have a therapeutic piece, then it's not an absence. And so that's something that I'd love to see happen,
We're thinking about, we're still toying with the idea of setting one up it would be located centrally at RPA, because we have the facility there, and it would be in lieu of a 10-day suspension or a long-term suspension. You go and get academic support and therapeutic support, and it counts, so you're not falling behind.
Okay, but so that's still getting worked out?
Yes, so that is, and the concept of, we used to have night school, but as we're thinking about these other programs, how can we all house those at RPA, so it's Central City, we can have bus routes there and all that kind of stuff, so we could do that as another alternative to a pathway to get graduate kids. This is what Mary Shaw was talking about.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Larrabee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Damaris, thank you for your presentation. I just have a question on the now. I mean, I'm excited about the new building and the new school. Just as we were speaking with Principal Shaw and Mr. Correa, but my question right now is geared towards the seniors and some of the high school kids that I deal with, and some of them are seniors that have been pretty good students and succeeding academically, have fallen apart. What are you and your staff, what steps are you taking to help guide the seniors to a place where they need to be to graduate? Because some of the the academics and the grades that I've seen the past 2 months, 3 months, compared to their freshman, sophomore, and junior years of high school, I mean, it kind of saddens me a little bit. But what's in place now to get our seniors there, the ones that need us the most?
Yeah, that's quite a poignant issue right now. What this pandemic has done for the class of 21 is really kicked them in the chest. They lost the end of their junior year, just like the class of 20 missed the end of their senior year, and then now it's wrapped around to a full year. And some of them haven't stepped into school, in our school, in that amount of time. We're doing everything we possibly can. So kind of to dovetail with what I was responding to Mr. Hart about, when you were talking about suspension rate, and what I want to say is that all of our grade offices have retooled and use this as an opportunity to shift how they are operating, and it will be a permanent shift in that they are in an incredibly supportive role. Each person, each adult in the grade office has a set of students, and it's broken up equally. So, 300 kids across 6 people, everybody gets 50, where they're checking in almost daily with those kids or doing outreach. And the next layer is that the ones that we can have some mild success or that they're willing to buy in, we've set up some intervention classes where they meet daily with a staff member. How you doing? Check in, you're doing your English, you're doing your math, where do you stand with this? What can I help you with? But right now, what we have are a number of seniors in rough shape academically. And yeah, you have students that have been high performers for 11 years of school, 12, and now here we are, and you see their performance plummeting. What we're saying to teachers is, as students engage, welcome them, focus on what they can do now, and let's figure it out from there. Looking back at what was missed between September and now, what's the powerful learning that they need to have mastered, and focus on the important stuff. For the students that are on academic life support, let's say, we have dedicated 2 staff members to run credit recovery, okay?
That was my next
And
question.
some competency-based testing. So if you're sitting as a senior and you've passed junior English, freshman English, but you got, sophomore English, but when you were a freshman, you failed it and you haven't recovered it by way of summer school, we're giving them competency assessments to recover the credit. So it's by any means necessary, all within the law, of course, but it's a full court press. Mr. Gray and his team are just working nonstop. Hopefully, we get more students to come into the building right now. We didn't get a lot of buy-in. A lot of seniors are like, I'm done, But it doesn't mean we're not going to keep trying. I said to Mr. Gray, we'll make the room for any senior that's in rough shape right now to get him into cohort A, get him in here daily, and let's work with him. We're starting to find some success there.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further for Mr. Damaris? Thank you, Dr. Damaris. Oh, Mr. Malone?
I also just want to point out, essentially, we've got a cluster coordinator, we have a community facilitator, and the Durfee After Dark program and all those things that we're funding, but there are a couple positions on the wish list. I've asked Matt to go back and take a look at those. This is something that we will have more ESSER funds, or ESSER 3 funds, that would be in line with some of the stuff he's trying to do with PBIS and SEL supports. So that may be something that I come back in the future and say, here's a grant request to be able to expend money to.
Thank you. Next item up. Fiscal year budget updates.
So,
Mr. Almeida, or you?
I was just going to reiterate to the committee, I've heard the committee very serious about what we've already discussed, the guidance counselor, Dorn and Lord, and the SACs at Sylvia and Stone. And I put those down. Kevin and I would go back into the ability, but I will say to you in all candor, as you know, I built a budget that I know is going to grow more than what it is, so I'm confident that we could fund those positions at no worry to the committee. Although, of course, down the road, grant funds leave, but the SOA is going to continue to grow our foundation, so I think we'll be okay. So that I'm asking, or I'm stating to the committee that in my working draft of the budget, that hopefully you approve to put out for comment, it would include those 4 positions.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Next order of business, item number 3.6, vote to approve the Florida Public Schools fiscal year 2022 draft operational budget in the amount of $121,638,499. Is there a motion as such?
So moved.
Second.
Made by Mr. Hetzler, seconded by Ms. Larrabee. Any discussion on that? So the committee will release this in draft form for the public hearing. It would be scheduled for the committee on April 12th. That's keeping consistent with our budget schedule that needs to be adhered to by the CITA charter. So this will give Mr. Almeida an opportunity to post the draft budget for public review prior to the public hearing. We will commence that hearing on April 12th, and hopefully at that time, if the committee wishes to make any adjustments or changes to that draft prior to final adoption, it can be done at that point. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Mr. Agia? Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey? Ms. Larrabee?
Yes.
Mayor Coogan?
Item number 3.7, vote to approve Florida Public Schools fiscal year 2022 draft transportation budget in the amount of $11 million. Also to be released in preparation of the public hearing on April the 12th. Is there a motion as such?
So moved.
Made by Mr. Hetzler. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hart. Any discussion on the transportation? Hearing none, roll call, Madam Secretary.
Mr. Agia? Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Corey? Ms. Larrabee?
Yes.
Mayor Coogan?
Yes. Discussion, 3.8, update on school reopening is presented by Dr. Matthew Malone.
I just wanted to reiterate to the committee that we've been following the state directives, if you will, for opening K-5 by April 5th, middle level by April 28th. We've combined our middle and high school efforts together. So on the 28th, we'd open 6 through 12, and on the 5th, it would be K-5. We've done all the due diligence with the surveys and phone calls. It varies by school. As Matt said, he doesn't have many cohort B kids that want to come back, but at the elementary level, there's many. So we've begun the next iteration of the MOU with the FREA. We have good conversation. We have a second meeting on Wednesday. We think we can close that out and get back to the committee for approval. It's just extending some of the agreements we've already made. And we're feeling that based on the rollout of the vaccine and all the stuff we're doing, we're going to be ready to be at 3 feet and 5 days a week. And you can see in the plan that we sent out for comments and feedback this past week that we're doing this in a way that's phased to start at 6, then to get to 3 as we continue to grow the cohorts together. I'm meeting with the providers from the community also this week. One of the requests has been some help with transportation, and I think that's something we can definitely look at, using the one-time funds that we have to be able to help get kids across the city for after-school supports to help families. So these are all things that, this is a work in progress. It's not going to be perfect, and I've sent a video out this week where we said we're asking people's patience and flexibility, and so far, people have understood that that's what it's going to take. But our goal is 5 days a week over the next couple of weeks, and as many kids back as possible.
Mr. Hart?
Just a quick question, Dr. Malone. So the surveys have gone out, and is there any kind of guesstimate as to how many parents might be keeping their kids home as opposed to sending them?
So at the secondary level, it's pretty much, it's about 60% of the kids will be coming back, and about 40% will stay remote at the 9 through 12. At the elementary level, it's a flip in the other direction. So, but some elementaries will have more than others. So, for example, we know that at Tansy, the large majority of kids want to come back, and we can fit them at 3 feet. So we feel confident that if every single elementary kid wanted to come back, we would be able to fit them at 3 feet. But there are implications with lunch and breakfast in the classroom and a couple of those things. So we're working out those details now. Ken and his team have been great setting up mechanisms to do the breakfast and the seating of the desks to make sure we fit the guidance and the guidelines. We've worked with as I said, our teachers union to start the discussions, and it's always a work in progress. And I'm hopeful, like I said, at the elementary level to have the majority of the kids back.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Larrabee?
Just one quick question, Dr. Malone. Where are we going to be with the Chromebooks once we get these kids back? All the students that get back to school, they're not going to need their Chromebook anymore, right?
Well, no, that's so we we've so good at this that I'm envisioning us being a one-to-one district over the next year. So we will be essentially assigning kids Chromebooks when they're just regular students, even if we were back in the full in person. But we still are going to need a surplus for state assessments and those things. So the future of education, I think, has been flipped upside down in terms of the methodology, and this blended need of a Chromebook is critical to that success.
Okay, let me just elaborate a little bit. I think I may have asked it wrong. Are they, the kids that are going back to class, are they going to have to use their Chromebook in class?
Yes. Yeah, we do a lot of blend, yes, because don't forget, because of the new way of doing things, if I'm a third grade teacher, I may be teaching live streaming synchronous and may have a handful of kids at home. The communication device with the kids in the whole classroom is actually through the device. So if you have 25 kids on your roster, all 25 faces would be on the device. So there is still a need for the kids that are in person to have their computer devices.
At all times.
Not at all times, but it's just another learning tool. You got to think of the device is like a cell phone now. You have it for everything.
Okay.
Right. It functions as a textbook. It functions as their piece of paper now. I mean, it functions as everything. Pretty.
Okay. I mean,
in the next
I
5
don't know if I'm a big advocate of these kids having, getting back to school and having more screen time.
No, I totally understand and would agree with you, but
Yeah.
it's supplemental. The in-person value is the in-person instruction, but they're still going to need the technology tool to do some of the communications with their classmates that aren't in, and also to access the content. Not all the content, but I mean all the textbooks and all that stuff that's already embedded. And then, you know, with the, what do they call it, the reinforcing stuff, the interventions and stuff are all online as well. But I don't want you to think that when you go, like if you and I went and visited Afonsica in a month, you could walk in a room and everyone would be on their screen, but they're not doing something disconnected, like screen time, that just is kind of mundane screen time. It's all part of the curriculum delivery.
Okay. All right, thank you. I yield.
Okay, nothing further? Okay, last item up for new business is a discussion and vote to approve $600,000 to be added to the previous request of $1.8 million for the varsity baseball field at Durfee High School, as presented by Ken Pacheco. Can I have a motion in a second? Hearing none?
I'll motion it. Motion?
Second.
Second, yeah,
I
sorry.
have a motion and a second. Any questions for Mr. Pacheco? Mr. Hetzler?
Well, I mean, I want to know what. Good evening, Mr. Pacheco. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, just looking for a quick update on what the extra $600,000 is for.
So the $1.8 million price tag on the Durfee varsity baseball field is primarily just that. It's the playing field. It is the amenities that go along with that playing field, but at no point was the lighting included in that $1.8 million. What the hope is that when this thing went out to bid, certain amounts would be covered. We'll run new electric lines because of the scoreboard. Some of that work will already be part of the project, but the actual fixture, the lighting poles, the lighting, and the control panel was not included in this. On March 9th, at the city council meeting, when this was presented in open session, in full session, I should say, I was questioned about whether or not that piece was in the price, and it wasn't. And again, I gave the same exact answer that I just gave now, was that the hope was that we would be under budget on the baseball field, and then we would be able to supplement those funds to put the lighting in. At that point, the council asked that we add that into the price, and that that this committee would send it back with that additional 600, not send it back, add 600 to the current, and then they would do the same thing as an amendment on the next meeting to make the whole 2.4 million.
Right. So my next question would be, it's an expensive baseball field. are we doing anything extra? Like, are we trying to make this amazing baseball field, or could we provide a baseball field to the citizens of Fall River at a smaller price tag?
If we're going to put a turf field in, if we're going to put an artificial surface field in, the $1.8 million stands. It'll have new dugouts, all the fencing will be new, the drainage work that's involved, the swale work and outside of that field that will keep that field in great shape. All of that work has to be done. So no matter what we do, that piece would have to be done anyway. If it was a natural grass field, if this was just a sod field, so to speak, we would be doing 75% of this work anyway. The only difference would be the turf fields connect to a curb, so that curb is something we wouldn't have, and the different plies of the insulation and surfaces underneath the actual carpet are the only difference. We would be sodding that field now. The drawback to sodding a field, obviously, is that we wouldn't be able to use that field for a full year after it was planted. So the field would take, and we would be mowing it, but it would be off limits to any kind of activity whatsoever.
Right, and what would the cost difference be? If let's just say we decided to go that route and we didn't have a field for a year.
I would think that you'd take about $300,000 to $350,000 off that price, off the 1.8.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ken, I just want to make sure, so we got 1.8 for the field, and all the dugouts and the turf and
Yes.
Everything new, the drainage system. When did the lights come into play?
The question on the lighting was mine. So basically, I said that the only thing that's not included in the $1.8 million is the lighting. So that's how the lighting came into play. And then the questions were asked after that.
Okay, so when did I think lights are a good idea, but when did you start thinking about the lights for the field?
Basically, I think that you have a facility, an athletic facility that will probably price tag out at about $10 million. At a Division I school, I would think that lighting would be an amenity that we would want to have at that particular building. You do also have lighting on your football field. And basically, we could play football during the day. There's no need to have the lighting there, but at some point, we thought that lighting would be good to have Friday night games and so on. I think the same thing goes for both the baseball field and also the soccer field. Maybe an equity piece, that those lighting would allow us to have those evening games, but it also would allow us to rental ability on the fields. The more time I can have those fields played upon, off-season, the more we would be able to increase the revenue stream to keep the fields in great condition.
All right, I yield. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Hetzler?
All right, one more question, maybe the administration, maybe for Mr. Almeida. Is there any way, I'm sorry, you might be able to answer it as well, Mr. Pacheco, that the school department, we could pick up some of the costs? That way the city didn't have to pick them up. I know we have some monies. Is there something we could do?
Well, the school committee could vote to approve the use of Chapter 70 eligible dollars for capital projects, but it can only be a certain...
Over 150 grand.
You would have to vote for 150, but I think there's a cap as well as what could count. I don't know what that cap is. Maybe Kevin does, but so there is a methodology, a mechanism to be able to do that. There are monies coming to the city from the prior year and the current, coming from the city to the schools to meet their obligations that this committee may want to discuss at some point. But I wouldn't be proposing using ESSER funds for something like that, but I would propose using operational dollars that we have in arrears. So, because we could, we have other projects that we'd also like to be able to discuss, and, like the Talbot parking is one that we could get on, and finish the road projects that Ken started now with Henry Lord and Sylvia, and then, we're also looking at, some other projects that could tie into that.
Right, so that's a cap on overall capital improvement. So we push this to the city council, and then we can work on some of our other projects maybe with that money when it comes through.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. With that, I yield.
Anything further? Kev?
Just, I apologize for having to step out. The issue of the money for the lights, if the council and the city support that number, and then it comes in, I think you had mentioned you still haven't really studied it to get all details, but is there a way that we wouldn't necessarily have to spend that money?
I'm not positive. When I went with the $1.8 million, both to this committee and to the council, my intention was that I was hoping we wouldn't hit the $1.8 million mark on the field, and that we would have some residual funds left to do at least the groundwork, the infrastructure work completely, and have it ready to, for the foundations for the poles, or pay for even more of that. So I can't say that it's guaranteed to be that dollar amount. The $1.8 million is a probable cost, done by using the metrics that the architects and designers use in order to put budget numbers together. That's exactly what that is, and the same goes for the lighting.
Yeah, I mean, I support the program wholeheartedly, while at the same time I understand there's only so much money that city has, and all that, but I wouldn't want to lose the entire project over the lights, because that's something we could always build the infrastructure, like you say, the Little League fields do the same, and then a year later they can connect the lights and all that, but I wouldn't want to lose the project, but I don't believe that we'd be locked into spending it all. If they said, we could get a loan for, or a bond for 2.4 million and only spent 2.1, that 300,000, they never have to spend that. So I don't want people to think that this is just adding on upon adding on. I do think we need to look at how we're going to support some of the projects going forward, so we can be partners with the city. So I will be supporting this, but I don't think we should lose the project if the lights didn't get included. With that, I yield.
I have a motion, a second. Deb, please call the roll.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
No.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Corey? Ms. Larrabee?
Yes.
Mayor Coogan?
Yes. I do want to make one note. I did miss the can't even read it, 3.6, vote on the budget. I was in the hall talking with someone. I definitely would have voted yes on the budget. I just want that reflected in the minutes, please, Deb. Anything to come before the committee in
Mr.
new
Chairman.
business? Oh, Mr. Agia, I'm
On that
sorry.
same note, I had to step out, but was it as is here, basically?
As is, plus the 4 positions of the two SACs and 2 guidance counselors.
Yep. So please note the record, I support that as well. Thank you.
Anything on new business?
You want to reconsider those votes for the record?
Do it again?
You want to do it again?
Second that.
I'll entertain a motion, okay.
No, I mean, if you want to be included on the vote, I mean, all
Well, we both do, I just wanted
Yeah.
people to know where we stood.
right, I'll make a motion to reconsider
And I'll second it.
3.6, vote to approve the $121,638,499 FY 2022 draft operational budget to be released for the public hearing scheduled on Monday, April 12, 2021.
I have a motion, a second. Deb, please call the roll.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Corey? Ms. Larrabee?
Yes.
Mayor Coogan?
Yes.
Motion to reconsider the vote taken. 3.7, vote to approve the Fall River Public Schools fiscal year 2020 draft transportation budget in the amount of $11 million for the purpose of public release in preparation for the public hearing scheduled for Monday, April 12, 2021.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Deb, please call the roll.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Corey? Ms. Larrabee?
Yes.
Mayor Coogan?
Yes. Any new business to come before the committee? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Discussion. Deb, please call the roll.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Corey? Ms. Larrabee? Yes. Mayor Coogan?
Yes.
That is